Welcome back to Under Oath. I'm an attorney. I'm licensed in 18 states. I've taken constitutional law to test for these bars way too many times. And when I saw you were a guest, I was really interested to see your take on this. You know, the Constitution has changed over a period of time and the way we interpret it. I mean, do you think Washington could even imagine what we've done to this document?
No, I think he believed it was a living, breathing document. But what was hammered out at the beginning, this book talks about how it almost didn't come to pass, how the founding almost fell apart numerous times. And I think if you look at it, obviously it's been amended 27 times, but it has stood the test of time largely. There are a lot of people that come at it from different angles, but it's still, at its heart, is the best legal document providing liberty of any country in the world.
Now, you've had a lot of, you've written a couple of books, you've been everywhere in the world, with the idea of going, oh, okay, we don't like how many justices are on the Supreme Court based on their political affiliations. We think we should double or triple the size of the Supreme Court. I mean, I can't even imagine what kind of insane crap show that would be.
Totally. I mean, there's all kinds of ideas about it out there. In this book at the end, I talk about the National Constitutional Center a couple of years ago had this exercise, and they brought in scholars from progressive groups and conservative groups and libertarian groups. And each set of scholars was told, rip up the Constitution and come up with a new document. Well, they work on it, and they come up with essentially the same document. They go back to the main document itself, and they make tweaks. All of them make tweaks. The libertarians, their essential message was that every page should say, and we mean it, on the bottom. And the conservatives have a real problem with executive power, and they want to make sure that, executive orders are not as prevalent. And that, as you know, is a major issue. Washington had 8 executive orders. FDR had 3,200 plus. And so that was, and then the progressives thought that the Electoral College doesn't work and should be thrown out, and it should be ranked choice. They all decided that Supreme Court justices should serve for 18 years and not a life term. But other than that, they came back to the same original document, which is a fascinating experiment in the big picture.
Do you think it's a problem? Because I've been in front of many judges, and federal judges are always the toughest because they have nothing to lose. And the same with the Supreme Court justice, how they rule, what they do, they never have to worry about, losing their jobs. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is something that we as a country could look at, obviously. But, it was meant to take the politics out of it. Instead, it's inserted politics to it because, you have justices who wait until a certain administration is in before they retire. You have the unbalance of, some presidents get 3 appointments, nominees, and others get 0. I mean, there's issues with the Supreme Court, but largely it's designed to be, as you know, the checks and balances. And it's come under fire in recent years. This book itself is really a look at a soda-straw moment where the country's almost falling apart. Right after the British are defeated, we're under the Articles of Confederation, which aren't working, and the states are going after each other. And it's in that moment where, and people are saying, forget it, let's go back to British rule. In that moment, the Constitutional Convention is called in May of 1787, and they tap George Washington, the head of revolutionary forces, to be the head of this effort. And arguably, without him, we don't have a country today.
Now, you've heard there are a lot of different stories about the Constitution, how it was created, who put the most work into it. I mean, every time you turn around, there's another musical or movie that's trying to rewrite history. What do you think the closest interpretation is based on your studies on how the Constitution and who put the most effort into it?
Yeah, I think, listen, James Madison is the guy who's writing it down. However, George Washington plays this crucial role of being a figure that is a unifying figure. He provides gravitas to the room. Okay, at the beginning of this, they tap him and they're going to tweak the Articles of Confederation. But instead, he gets them to root and branch, pull up the Articles of Confederation and start from scratch. Now, there's a lot of dissent on big issues like states' rights versus federalism, about representation of big states and small states. And in that dissent, he is not a loud figure. He doesn't talk a lot during the convention, but he does work the room, especially outside of the venue at dinners and bringing sides together. So his presence, and then obviously he goes on to be the first American president, and nobody's writing him a note in the Oval Office desk saying, here's what you have to do. Nobody's passing him the torch. He is the torch, and he forms that executive. I think there are a lot of people who factor in, and musical or not, Washington is a crucial figure in the whole thing.
When I've had to take constitutional a ridiculous amount of times, and the way we review things, the way the Supreme Court's allowed to review things is based on different class levels. You have your intermediate scrutiny, rational basis, and strict scrutiny. And in the last basically 5 to 7 years, sexual orientation has been given this strict scrutiny issue. And I'm wondering, will there ever be a class that we're going to be surprised about? Wow, we wouldn't expect that. We wouldn't expect that to be a protected class, depending on, where we are and how we feel about things.
I agree with you. I mean, it does seem like it's evolving. Would we be surprised? I don't think in today's day and age we'd be surprised by much, because we've seen quite a bit in recent years. I do think it's fascinating to look at how the Supreme Court has been fractured, how it has handled different things. But some of the things that we don't talk about is where they agree on different elements, and where it is maybe not a unanimous, but a 8-1, something like that. There are a lot of things that we don't cover because they're not controversial. And I have this thing on my show called Common Ground, where I bring Republicans and Democrats together to talk about what they're working on, not what they're fighting about. We don't do where the Supreme Court comes together. But to your point, nothing's going to surprise me in the current environment.
When I talk about this stuff all the time, because people always ask me, because they think because I'm licensed in all these states, I should be an expert. I'm not. But I like to be able to discuss with them. I said, isn't it curious how we have supposedly the 9 greatest legal minds on the planet, and somehow we split it right down the middle on things that aren't that complicated. And that should be troublesome, and it should bother people that judges in this scenario, especially at this level, can't be unbiased.
Yeah, and I think that's the politics of how some judges look at things, justices look at things. And I think that's why some of the criticism of the institution, vigorous defense by people like Anthony Kennedy and others who are going to have books looking behind the scenes at the Supreme Court. But to my point earlier about possible tweaks, I could see an 18-year term limit. It has the same feeling of a life appointment, but it has new blood that is coming in.
What I find interesting is I have a degree in journalism, and I've worked at a couple different places, and based on where I was at, I would sometimes, my editors or my producers would say, hey, Jeff, I didn't like your take on something. How difficult is that sometimes to be in an industry and be concerned about how your audience feels, or how your the channel you work at, based on how you truly feel about something?
Fortunately, I work at a place that allows me to do what I do. And I've worked there 26 years, and no one has called me up and said, you got to do it this way. I have a problem with this. In 26 years. I'm telling you, I've never received that call. So they allow the news to be the news, and I'm the executive editor of my show, so I control that space. As far as what viewers care about, I obviously everybody looks at the ratings, but I'm in the mindset of if you build it, they will come, and that's where I always have been. And any concern that I have is more about getting it first, but more importantly, getting it right. And hopefully that pays off in the long time.
Well, I can't tell you how great it was to talk to you today. I've followed you throughout the years, and your continued success works for me.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for having me on.